The US-Iran war has restarted. In reality, it never really stopped. It was just a pause, but now we're full back into kinetic war. Now, this shouldn't be surprising, as none of the 14 points of the memorandum of understanding that was agreed between the US and Iran have really been met except one. The US has pretty much violated all the points except one that actually benefits the US, which is the end of the US blockade on Iran, because that allows oil to pass through and that reduces the oil disruption that is a result of this war on Iran. So we were wondering, why has Iran not done anything regarding all these violations that we're going to go into? Well, it seems like they were waiting for the funeral of their late Supreme Leader, Ali Khamenei, to end, which ended on Thursday, to then retaliate against all the U.S. violations on the Memorandum of Understanding. And this is all to do with respect to who controls the Strait of Hormuz. Iran has said, as part of the Memorandum of Understanding, and has said publicly 1,000 times, that the only route that ships are allowed to use is the northern corridor of the Strait of Hormuz that is managed by Iran. Iran is not going to apply any fees for the first 60 days as part of the MOU, but they have to still pass through that corridor. What the U.S. has done is they created a southern corridor in the Strait of Hormuz to allow ships to go in and out. And Iran wasn't happy about that, because for Iran, that's their leverage. The U.S. is essentially saying, we're going to create another route that Iran doesn't control. And that takes away Iran's leverage of the ability to control the volume of oil that passes through the Strait of Hormuz. Because for Iran, that's the only thing it has. The only thing it has that can put pressure on the U.S. is reducing the volume of the oil that passes through if the U.S. isn't meeting the conditions agreed upon as part of the MOU. And the U.S. hasn't been meeting all those conditions. The war in Lebanon, Israel is still occupying Lebanon. And so the first point of the MOU has been met. The U.S. has attacked Iran a number of times before this weekend. The frozen assets of Iran have not been given back to Iran. This was supposed to be done immediately. Trump has threatened Iran multiple times. And as part of the MOU, they said that no more threats are going to be done by either party. And now even sanctions, which as part of the MOU, there's not going to be any new sanctions. The U.S. has applied new sanctions on Iran and have removed the unsanctioning of oil that they did as part of the MOU. So the U.S. has not met any of these conditions. Now, as part of the MOU, Iran was not going to apply any service fees, but it says that Iran is going to manage the process of moving ships and returning it back to pre-war volume. But that is Iran's action to do, and no other party shall be involved in that. It doesn't say that explicitly, but that was kind of inferred by the wording of the MOU. Because Iran knows that the only thing that's going to make the U.S. meet its obligations as part of the MOU is, the ability to open the Strait of Hormuz fully. And if they don't meet it, Iran can close it and put that pressure on the U.S. And so the U.S. was trying to remove that leverage. And so all those ships that were passing through the southern corridor that the U.S. has created that, moves the leverage from Iran. Well, Iran told those ships, if you continue passing through this, we're going to attack you. No one's allowed to do that. And the ships pass through, and then they attacked the ships. And so the U.S. on Friday came out and said, we want a public announcement from Iran that they're going to open the Strait of Hormuz fully, and there's not going to be any attacks on any ships, and we want an apology. Well, Iran rejected that ultimatum, and instead, actually, there was a ship that was passing through the Strait of Hormuz in the southern corridor, not the Iranian northern corridor, and they shot at it. Interestingly, with a cruise anti-ship missile, which there are reports that the ship is actually sinking now in the Strait of Hormuz, and Iran has said that we're going to close now the Strait of Hormuz because the U.S. is not meeting any of its obligations. And it seems like they were waiting for the funeral to end, which ended on Thursday, for them to actually, put pressure on the U.S. Now, what the U.S. did was, in response to that, attack a lot of places in Iran in the coastal line It seems like they're trying to degrade their communication and their ability to control the Strait of Hormuz. And in retaliation to that, Iran has carried out a massive attack on the U.S. bases in the Gulf, as you can see over here. So this is, the past 12 hours. So the Iran, in response to the attacks on its coastal line, has attacked for the first time the U.S. Navy logistics port of Duqm, Oman. So they haven't really attacked U.S. bases in Oman before. There was one incident at the initial part of the war, but Iran denied it. But it seems like now they've actually attacked that base. And this is a targeted the support centers for ships and aircraft carrier refueling platforms in the Omani port of Duqm. The U.S. Navy uses this port since at least 2019. So that's a new attack. There's 2 merchant vessels in Hormuz that were attacked, where there's reports that one is sinking because Iran has used an anti-ship cruise missile, which hasn't used those that many before. I think this is only the 4th or 5th time it uses this kind of anti-ship missile. It also attacked Qatar, Udeid air base. It attacked it initially in the first part of the war, but since the ceasefire, that Qatar hasn't been attacked. The Fifth Fleet in Bahrain, that has been attacked last week, and now it has been attacked again. And in Kuwait, there's some Patriot sites and radars that were attacked, and there's actually reports now that Kuwait has been using missiles to shoot, not defense missiles, but missiles to shoot into Iran. So they're actually not just using airspace, but their land to carry out those attacks. And they've also attacked the Prince Hassan Air Base. This is different to the Muwathaq air base that Iran has been attacking in Jordan. This is a new air base. So there's, it's an extensive attack, and the damage seems to be not just a tit for tat kind of attack and then calm things down. This seems to be an escalation in response to the US's attacks on Iran. And Iran has said that before, if you attack us, we're going to attack you with at least 1.5 times. We're going to escalate to put pressure on the US. So here, Iran's RGC announces the destruction of the fighter jet maintenance and repair center and command center at the US Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar with ballistic missiles. And the RGC also struck and stopped a second violating vessel in the Strait of Hormuz. This is in Bahrain, where you can see smoke actually coming out of the Fifth Fleet. That Fifth Fleet, has been attacked numerous times throughout, even the ceasefire, really, but always in response to the U.S. attacking Iran. Iran has this thing where it waits to be attacked to then carry out attacks on U.S. bases. Now, Galibaf has noted that the era of one-sided deals is over. We told you, keep your word or pay the price. Reality is knocking. And he points to the point 5 of the MOU, which says, upon the signing of this MOU, the Islamic Republic of Iran will make arrangements. It will make the arrangements using its best efforts for the safe passage of commercial vessels with no charge for 60 days only. So it's saying no one has that authority except us. As part of the MOU, we've agreed with the US that we, Iran, will make the arrangements. And so the US kind of creating its own arrangements under the Southern Corridor is in violation of the MOU as Iran understands it. Now, this is a statement by the UK Maritime Trade Operations, which gives information to vessels, commercial vessels, about the risk in the region, and it looks at the Strait of Hormuz. And it's so weird. It says the maritime security threat level in the Strait of Hormuz remains severe, despite the July 12th, 2026 Iranian proclamation that the Strait of Hormuz is closed. The southern route remains available and has been expanded to accommodate two-way traffic. It's basically saying there is this risk. Iran is saying that, they're going to attack ships, but please, merchant vessels, use the southern corridor and take that risk on you, which is insane. Why would the UK MTO say that to vessels? It's almost like, hey, we're noting that there is a high risk that you're going to be attacked because Iran is saying that they're closing the Strait of Hormuz, but hey, just take that risk. It's okay. We've created the southern corridor for you. Now, what's really interesting is that if the U.S. didn't create that southern corridor, the Strait of Hormuz wouldn't be closed. and there would actually be more vessels, oil flowing through the Strait of Hormuz than what we have right now. But the problem for the US is they want to take that leverage away from Iran because it seems like they've always intended to restart this war. The issue that the US has is one, they don't have enough ammunition and equipment in that region, and so they have to wait and pause to replenish that ammunition. But two is the oil. The reason why oil prices are not as high as we would expect them to be, the reason why there's no oil shortages is because the US is using its oil strategic reserves, which is this oil inventory that it has, to be released into the system to put the prices low. It's kind of increasing the supply from the storage that it has for emergency situations. Now, this oil storage reserve, strategic reserve, is going to be depleted. It's expected by the end of August. And so the US really needs oil to be flowing through there to avoid oil shortages in the US itself and for oil prices to skyrocket just before the midterm elections in the US in November. And the problem is that it takes about 40 days for oil to go from the Middle East to the US for that oil to be refined into, end products such as diesel and jet fuel and all the other products that it has. So even though the U.S. is a net exporter of crude oil, it still imports a lot of the oil from the Middle East, which is different to shale oil that the U.S. has, because the refineries in the U.S. are structured in a way to process Middle Eastern oil and create products based on the molecular structure of that different oil of the Middle East compared to the shale oil. And that takes years to actually change that process. And the U.S. hasn't changed that process yet because shale oil is still a relatively new thing in the U.S. And so that's the dilemma that Trump has, is that, he either has to go all out and carry out another massive attack on Iran to end this once and for all. But it seems like he doesn't have the ability to do that because Iran is such a large country. And if they could do that, they would have done that already. Why wait? Every day that passes puts more leverage into Iran's hands because the U.S. is depleting their strategic reserves. And so restarting the war right now is going to have a completely different effect on oil compared to starting the war, in 28th of February, because now we've used so much of that strategic reserve, that buffer, that now we don't have that buffer to kind of withstand another 100 days of war. So waiting to restart the war, makes sense if you're restarting the war in a year's time, but restarting the war now is going to have a huge impact on the U.S. economy and U.S. oil prices. But at the same time, they don't want Iran to have that leverage, because Iran having that leverage puts pressure on the U.S. and kind of makes the U.S. have to meet its obligations as part of the MOU, so to ensure that Iran opens the Strait of Hormuz and allows as much oil to pass through. But Trump isn't going to, when I saw the MOU, it was very almost laughable that we were expected, one, that the U.S. is going to create this $300 billion construction fund for Iran. That was on the condition that Iran and the U.S. enter into a nuclear deal, which was never going to happen, because Trump wants more concessions than what Iran gave as part of the JCPOA with the Obama deal. But Iran now has the Strait of Hormuz. It has more leverage. It has more assets. So it's the U.S. that has to make concessions relative to the JCPOA deal in terms of a nuclear deal. But in terms of the frozen assets, imagine, Trump giving money to Iran when he made fun of Obama for doing that. And now, Obama deal was about $2 billion that was given to Iran. Here we're talking about at least 24 billion of Iran's frozen assets being unfrozen. Again, Obama, it's not like Obama gave them U.S. money. It's Iran's money that the U.S. was giving, that Obama gave to Iran. But it's the kind of the title in the news, Trump gave Iran, 12 billion or whatever, $24 billion. That is something that Trump was never going to, I think, do, because he's made fun of Obama for giving Iran much less money, $2 billion. compared to 12 billion or the 24 billion that we heard about as part of this MOU of Iran's frozen assets being unfrozen. And so now this war isn't about nuclear, the nuclear weapons that we were told started this war. It's now all about the Strait of Hormuz and who controls the Strait of Hormuz. But it seems like now the U.S. is escalating and is restarting the war, but doing it from a much more weaker point because the U.S. doesn't have the oil buffers to ensure that oil prices don't skyrocket and there won't be oil shortages during a time during summer where oil demand increases because everyone's on holiday, they're traveling, they're driving. And so the next couple of weeks is going to be very difficult for the economies of the world as oil prices continue to increase. And for Iran, why would it open the Strait of Hormuz when the U.S. is not meeting any of the points of the memorandum of understanding? How do they put pressure on the U.S. to ensure that they meet those conditions? As you can imagine, Iran doesn't trust the U.S. because there's this whole talk about you can never trust Iran. Well, Iran actually entered into a nuclear deal with the U.S., the JCPOA, the Obama deal, and they met all the conditions as part of the JCPOA until Trump came in and ripped that agreement. So even though Iran can enter into an agreement with the U.S., a new president can come and just rip that agreement apart, even though Iran's meeting all the conditions. And so Iran's learning from that mistake that they did in the JCPOA and saying, hey, we're not going to give you anything unless you give us something back. And we're going to, hold the Strait of Hormuz as the leverage to put pressure on you so that you can meet your end of the bargain of the MOU. And, once you take a step, we'll take a step with you. And that's why the Strait of Hormuz is so important for Iran. And they don't want another corridor that they don't control because that removes that leverage. And that's why the U.S. wants that southern corridor and is willing to take the risk to, ensure that opens. And now it seems like that risk has backfired because now the Strait of Hormuz is completely closed. And it's going to, I feel, continue to be closed until the U.S. starts to meet some of the obligations it has as part of the MOU, such as at least unfreezing some of the assets and giving that to Iran as a first step. And then, obviously, the whole point about Lebanon and the sovereignty of Lebanon. Lebanon was mentioned 3 times in the first point of the MOU that we need to respect the sovereignty of Lebanon. And with Israel occupying the southern part of Lebanon, that violates the first point of the MOU. But again, is Trump going to put pressure on Israel to withdraw from Lebanon? I don't see that happening. I think for Israel, for Benjamin Netanyahu, that is political suicide, especially with elections coming up in October, which is sooner than the November midterm elections. How will Benjamin Netanyahu say, okay, yeah, we've lost dozens of soldiers in southern Lebanon. Now we're just going to withdraw from Lebanon. That will be the end of his political career. And so I don't see him doing that. There seems to be a plan to restart this war with Iran. And because for the U.S., long term, they were never going to allow Iran to control the Strait of Hormuz because they would be able to control the volume of oil that comes out of the Middle East and therefore kind of use that anytime the U.S. attacks Iran. And the U.S. and Israel, I'm sure, would like to continue to be attacking Iran, given that Iran is now rising as the regional power that holds a lot of oil, that has a strategic location for China and Russia to be, they've built that corridor from China to Iran to go up to Eastern Europe and Russia, which avoids the U.S. Navy. This is kind of, you could take that route instead of the waterways. And the purpose of that is, the U.S. controls all of the choke points in the water choke points around the world, and therefore China can avoid those choke points, avoid the U.S. Navy by using these rail corridors that goes into Iran, that goes into Eastern Europe and the western part of Russia. And so we see this as escalating. I would love to know your thoughts about whether you think this is going to get worse, or again, this is just Trump trying to put pressure and then backtracking, and then on Monday before uh, the stock market opens, he's going to say, "Oh, Iran came and now said they're sorry and they want to negotiate again." I mean, how many times are going to fall for that? Oh, Iran's coming and they want to negotiate now. Please. But yeah, if you did like this video, do hit the like and subscribe, and we'll see you very soon.